What up?
Living
It's
the dream.
Thursday. So funny story. My fiance this morning was because we have stuff. We have like plans for Thursday evening, and this morning my fiance came to me and was like, "Oh, can you pick me up from work today because I'm going to be running late, and so I need you to come pick me up so that we're not late." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "Well, we have those plans." And I was like, "No, those are for Thursday." And she was like, "It is Thursday." And I was like, "No, it's not." And I'm still not convinced. I'm not convinced it's Thursday. I don't know what happened to me. I missed a day somewhere because I keep looking and it keeps being Thursday.
Life's going by too fast.
I don't know. It sounds weird. Like the off season is. Maybe it's because it's the off season. I think that is part of it. Like during the NFL season, everything's so regimented, and I know like okay, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, going to be this, and I need to be here then, and blah blah blah. But during the off season, I'm just there are days I don't even like change out of sweatpants, and and I've rewatched The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett. I'm taking full advantage, and I think it's rotting my brain to some level. But anyway,
you'll get into like some kind of you'll snap out of the funk when things start to heat up more with Sean Payton has been kind of at a even line right now. Nothing has really moved the needle anywhere yet. And once draft starts stuff, and free agency stuff starts, it's going to be back into high gear. There really is no off season. We've talked about that before.
See, I disagree. I think this is permanent. I think it's only going to get worse as I get older, and I'm just slowly, my brain is just collapsing from the inside. I don't know if you noticed. So they're like tearing up the street, and you might be able to hear it. You might not. Hopefully you can't, because that would be really annoying if you heard it throughout the entire podcast. But like they're like, I don't know if you've ever seen how they tear up the street, and they have basically a giant jackhammer on a backhoe, and it just kind of drills straight in it. And so you can actually see it's shaking my house. Like if you look closely, you can see the mic, I guess, rocking back and forth. And it's literally shaking my house. It's bizarre. It's a bizarre feeling. Like minor earthquakes going on.
They're courtesy of the New Orleans street department fixing your road.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. I feel honored that they're actually doing something rather than just letting the potholes exist for eternity, which is what they usually do. But all right, yeah, we're just kind of vamping here to let some people find us. It's the middle of the afternoon on a Thursday, as I'm told, and so I don't expect a huge watch party in here, but we should get a few as they pick up. We're gonna talk about Sean Payton. We're gonna talk about the Senior Bowl. Kind of what to expect next week. I'll be out there. And then we're going to have a mailbag. So if you have questions that you want answered, throw them in the comments. I see we have a few already. So that'll be a good start, and we'll go from there. But yeah, we could probably get started here, Steve, if you're ready.
Welcome inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller along with Jeff Nowak. Getting into some more Sean Payton watch talk. He actually visited with the Arizona Cardinals. Is visiting with the Arizona Cardinals as far as we know right now. And, also get into a little bit of Senior Bowl talk and obviously some of our AFC, NFC predictions at the end of this all. But, Jeff, we do have a player out of the Sean Payton race now with the Carolina Panthers naming a head coach.
Yeah, the Panthers hired Frank Reich, which, I think they should have hired Steve Wilkes personally, but, apparently he didn't do enough. And when you get fired as a white guy, you get second chances in the NFL, apparently, and we've seen that here. We've seen that elsewhere. So that's what the Panthers are gonna do for Frank Reich. But first things first, I do have a rant I want to go off on, and it's gonna preempt the Sean Payton stuff, and it's mainly just kind of a programming thing here. So what I need people to understand about this podcast is it is a recorded podcast that is for free on the internet. It is not our full-time jobs. We do this because we like it and we like you guys, and we're trying to provide content. All that said, I sit here and I ask for reviews and feedback and all this and that, and we never get any, and that's fine. I'm not mad about it. But today I look at our reviews and we have a 1-star review on there. And it kind of pissed me off.
Yeah.
The reason is that we didn't talk about Pete Carmichael in our Friday episode. Now, again, keep in mind, this is not our full-time job, so sometimes scheduling is difficult, and that's what happened last week. So we had to record that episode on Wednesday, but we also posted an episode on Wednesday, so I didn't want to post it on Thursday because I wanted to give people the maximum amount of time to listen to the Wednesday episode before I threw another one at them. So we posted it on Friday. Now, wouldn't you know it, on Thursday, the news breaks that Saints aren't firing Pete Carmichael. So what do? Do we just throw that episode in the trash? Do we record an emergency episode? No, because we have a job and we don't have time. So we post that episode on Friday and we come back on Monday and we talk about Pete Carmichael for a half an hour. But hey, we now have a 1-star review because some entitled person thought that they deserve that rant immediately and not 2 days later on the podcast they get for free. So all that is to say, I don't like that guy, whoever it is, because I work pretty hard on this, and it bothers me that we now have a 1-star review for something that's stupid. Anyway, that's it. That's my rant. I appreciate everyone who listens. It's also not a good reason for a 1-star review, guys. Like, if you're going to give me a 1-star review, I better have earned it. I've said some pretty ridiculous shit on this podcast, and you could come at me with a 1-star review saying, oh, you didn't talk about Pete Carmichael fast enough, when this was an episode, bear in mind, it was a 70-minute episode where we break down the entire upcoming free agent class. Like, it took a good amount of time to kind of get that all together and record a podcast and then edit the podcast and then produce the podcast. And then, anyway.
They don't want to hear that. They just want the
content. No, I'm probably going to get more 1-star reviews from this rant.
Oh, but it. You're welcome.
I do appreciate y'all for listening. And if again, and I say this all the time and no one ever does it, DMs are open on Twitter. My email account is jeffrey.nowak@odyssey.com. My, the comments on YouTube, I check them every day. If we didn't talk about something, if you want content, let me know. I'm more like, I love feedback. I love criticism. What I don't love is 1-star reviews that never go away because some idiot doesn't realize that this was recorded, that I couldn't just magically put content into a podcast that was already recorded based on the breaking news that happened 12 hours early. Anyway, like I said, reach out to me. I would much prefer that than a bad review because those reviews don't go away. Anyway, moving on.
You're stuck with it. It's like your permanent record. I had to get that
off my chest because it's been waiting all day. I'm the worst. I know I'm the worst.
Permanent record.
It is. It is. Oh, guys. I don't have a lot going on. Anyway, changing course. Let us talk about Sean Payton. So it does feel like we are getting very, very close to Sean Payton's not coaching anywhere in 2023. And people are going to ask, what changed? And I'm not sure anything did. I think maybe there was a point where we all kind of fooled ourselves into thinking that all these teams that have head coach openings are going to bend over backwards to hire Sean, jump through every hoop imaginable, trade whatever they have to trade, pay him whatever he wants. And then you get to the point where they're doing interviews and it just doesn't seem like that's the case. And I don't think that it has anything to do with like how the interviews went. I just think it's just the reality of what you can expect teams to go through to hire a coach in the moment, when the alternative is, okay, we're going to cede complete control of player development, of decision making. He wants his GM to do his bidding, and he wants to have all of this control, and he also wants to make $20 million, and we're going to have to give up a first-round pick to get him. And it's like, I thought all along that it was like weird to me that it was everyone was so confident that was going to happen, but I drank the Kool-Aid. But I think now we're kind of getting to the point where it just doesn't seem like it's going to make sense for a team like the Broncos, for a team like the Cardinals. Now, the interesting thing is if the Broncos do hire DeMeco Ryans, does that kind of reopen the door for the Texans?
Right.
But I don't know. I have a hard time seeing him landing anywhere this offseason, the way things are currently.
No, to me, the Texans are really attractive for both ends in the fact that with the organization, you need that really clean, fresh start that Sean's going to bring in and that you want him to bring in with that organization after they just went through with the whole Deshaun Watson saga. And I think they have the proper compensation that I think could be worked out reasonably for both sides to come out ahead on this. And I think to really work out as a realistic trade. The Denver one, I just don't know about them having to give up so much draft capital after just sacrificing so much with the Russell Wilson trade. That to me was always a big issue. And I'm waiting and really interested to see what happens still with Arizona. That got pushed back a little bit, but his meeting with the Cards. And for me, it comes down to does Sean really want to work with Kyler Murray? And I know everyone goes to that clip of him on the Colin Cowherd show talking about him as a quarterback, but the work ethic, the issues that have popped up, I think since then, kind of throw up a big red flag for me if I'm a head coach going into that situation, no matter who you are.
See, I disagree with that. I don't think that this is coming down to whether Sean wants to coach a team or not. Like, that's my point. Is I think that's the mistake we made as we went into this, and we were like, well, where does Sean want to be? And in reality, I'm just not sure that these teams are willing to jump through the hoops and over the hurdles for what it would take to hire Sean. So, like, who knows whether Sean would coach Kyler Murray? I don't think it's going to get to that point, because if it was, then you would have already gotten to the point where you're establishing compensation, and you haven't. If it was a question of whether Sean wants to coach a team, you would be going through second interviews. Sean's not turning down second interviews. They're not happening. Like, the Panthers didn't ask Sean for a second interview. They went and hired Frank Reich, right? Like, Denver is giving second interviews with guys, and one of them is not Sean Payton.
With that? He supposedly was getting a rescheduled second interview with Denver, and that suddenly went off the table.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not in tune with that process out in Denver,
right.
But
and he's just doing does seem with Arizona. So
yeah, and I don't know. I think there's a gap between the perceived need for Sean Payton and the actual need for Sean Payton as it's seen by the teams that have the openings. Now, they could be making a terrible mistake and saying, well, we don't think we need to go the whole 9 yards and trade for him and pay him and do all this, and we trust that we can bring somebody in and they can turn around Russell Wilson and they can kind of reestablish Kyler Murray as the guy we saw as a rookie, and we can draft a Bryce Young and mold him into the starter of the future and this and that. And if that's true, great. If it's not, then you missed an opportunity to have an established head coach with a much clearer vision of how you can be a competitive roster and get to a Super Bowl and get to the playoffs and whatnot. And that's going to be the question, but it's really not a matter of whether it's true or not, it's whether they believe it, because if they don't hire him and they don't want to hire him, then the Saints are out in the cold one way or another. And so that's why, from a Saints perspective, I think you kind of just have to start looking at, who's going to be there at number 40? Because I think that's what you're going to end up with this season. Maybe next year that changes. I don't see it changing this year. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Carolina bowed out isn't a huge blow to me. I never thought there was a real true chance of Sean going into the NFC South. There was just too much that would hurt with that, just from his coaching legacy as a whole in New Orleans, and just having the fact that you had to see him twice a year, every year. I didn't like that one bit. So I don't have a problem, obviously, missing out on that opportunity, quote unquote. But what hurts is, obviously, this year you don't get any compensation, and we're still talking about this for another year.
Yeah, the one thing that I think is an interesting question is like there's this kind of standing idea that okay, if it doesn't happen this year, the compensation will go down.
I don't
And
quite get
Sean
that.
said that, but I'm not sure why that. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know if that's true, right? Because one way or another, next year you're going to be in the same boat. Sure, he has one fewer year left in his contract, but if you're trading for him, you're going to extend him anyway, and he's going to want to make more money, so he's going to want to renegotiate it. So how would that actually change? Because if you need a head coach next year, you're not going to just wait out the contract, right? So I don't know how true that is. I do think that was kind of some gamesmanship on Sean's part, trying
absolutely.
to add some fuel to some of these teams, right? Like to I don't know, and I don't know how much of it is the Saints asking too much, but like I don't think it got to that point where they were actually negotiating for assets. So how could it be that?
No, I mean, to me, Sean was amazing in that interview, just throwing out little nuggets out the boat, like constantly, mentioning draft compensation, a mid to late round first pick, first round draft
Yeah.
pick. And then that whole little, well, I don't know. I think compensation would be less going into next year was just that little parting kind of comment. And yeah, can really, I guess, kind of you wonder if he knew ahead of time that there wasn't anything going to happen this year. I don't know, like, hinting the fact that this is going to happen another year, and it's a team won't have to give up as much for me then for whatever reason. But I don't understand any rationale that would be the case just because there'd be one less year left on his current deal with the Saints.
So you think he's playing 3D chess and he always knew he wasn't going to
Right,
go
maybe.
anywhere, and he's
Yeah,
just setting up
yeah.
this stage where everyone's going to be like, no, he can't get as much, so he's not going.
I don't know, but yeah, I started to think of that craziness, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sean's a smart guy. I don't think he's that. I don't even know if smart would be the word, like sociopathic. It would be a better word if that was the case. But yeah, so like I think from a Saints perspective, you have to operate because and we're going to talk a lot about the Senior Bowl. And the reason I say this is because you have to start your offseason. You have to start scouting players. You have to start making plans for what you're going to do. And you can't bank on this return in a trade anymore. Like if something comes in at the 11th hour and suddenly you add assets, great. But I think from the Saints perspective, you have to go forward not expecting to get back anything in this trade because you're going to go out to the Senior Bowl next week, 4 days from now, and you're going to have to scout players. You're going to have to figure out who you're going to focus on. And, one of the interesting things that Mickey said when I asked him about kind of like how does that change your scouting is it doesn't. You're still going to scout all the players the same way you would, but it's going to affect the players you bring into the building. You can have 30 visits from prospects. And so are you going to bring in CJ Stroud? No. Right? Are you going to bring in Bryce Young? No. Because if you're in the middle of the first round, you might be able to trade up. You're not trading into the first round all the way to the top 10. So like there's a lot of prospects that you do not have a chance at. So that kind of changes that. But it doesn't change how you're going to scout people from an organic perspective because, and I think it's a good point, is 4 years from now, 5 years from now, some of these players are going to be up for free agency. And if you had a good grade on them now, odds are you're going to have a good grade on them then, and you might bring those guys in. And you see that for the Saints. Like they do that in their scouting a good bit of the time. So that's going to be something you look at this week as you go out to the Senior Bowl and you try to figure that out. The bigger question to me, though, is do you lose both of your defensive coordinators? Because
Sure.
both Chris Richard and Ryan Nielsen have interviewed with two different teams. Ryan Nielsen is the Falcons and the Vikings, both offensive head coaches. Chris Richard is the Panthers and the Dolphins. Now, I don't know how his status as a candidate would hold up with Frank Reich, now the head coach. Because I don't know why they interviewed a defensive coordinator candidate prior to hiring a head coach anyway. But I do know that Mike McDaniel down with the Dolphins would really benefit from kind of a home run hire as a defensive coordinator. And I think that Chris Richard would qualify as a home run hire as a defensive coordinator. So that has me nervous.
Would he end up though getting the Saints a compensatory pick?
I don't know.
Okay.
I know it's true for GM candidates, and I think it would be
Yeah.
true for a head coach, but I don't know if that's true for a coordinator. I'd have to check. But yeah, either way, it would be
I'm not
next
sure
year
either.
if that was the case. Yeah.
Right.
But no, I mean, it's an interesting situation because, and we mentioned this, and the reason I say they're all offensive head coaches is you, as a defensive coordinator working with an offensive head coach, you are essentially the defensive head coach, right? Like if you want to look at it that way. It's the same way that DA ended up being a head coach candidate for the Saints by sheer virtue of leading a very good defense. But you would never have considered Pete Carmichael as a serious candidate to succeed Sean Payton or even be a head coach candidate, right? And so now, if you're Chris Richard and you're Ryan Nielsen, you're looking at this situation being like, I'm never going to get credit in the staff, but I might on another staff. And so the idea is like, well, one of them might get hired and you offer the position to the other one. But what if they both say, you know what, no, like the grass greener over here, and you lose both? I think that's a realistic possibility. And it would really throw a wrench into some of these offseason plans you have, because you're now replacing our defensive line coach, secondary coach, and defensive coordinator.
And man, it's tough to think that you'd want to do the coordinator deal if you end up losing both in a situation like this. It gives you like the worst case scenario of having the coordinator role leaving when you have a good defense, and then both end up leaving for the full-time position instead of the position.
But you could hire a new secondary coach, a new defensive line coach, and then have a defensive coordinator set up.
Or I mean, but the Saints could turn around too and then be like, hey, to either one of those guys and offer them the full-time, obviously, the defensive coordinator position. But that's the thing too. Does someone want to make their own stamp on things outside of Dennis Allen?
Yeah. Right. And that's like, here's the thing. Do you do that preemptively? Right? To make sure you don't lose both? Or do you wait and offer it to if someone doesn't get, you know what I mean? Like, that's where you are right now. And it's really awkward.
It is.
And I don't know what you do. Right? Like, because if you really want to keep Chris Richard, do you offer him the full role now and say, sorry, Ryan, go enjoy Minnesota? You basically would then guarantee you're losing one by sacrificing the chance of keeping both.
I think they have to come to those realizations, but yeah, to me, to lose both of them would be a really
it would be a big
blow. But like I said, I would understand it for the fact that if both of them are like, well, we are under this defensive coach, we want to go on to a more offensive team to kind of flex our defensive muscles. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It is interesting, too, because the only one who never gets talked about is Michael Hodges, and I would argue that he's one of the better position coaches in terms of like the linebackers have always been a strength of this team, and they give them almost nothing to work with.
You never know.
They don't invest in the position. Like the fact that they spent a second round pick on a linebacker, you're like, wow, look at that. Like Caden Ellis was a 7th round draft pick. I don't know. I do think it's interesting, though, because when you look at the last time the Saints didn't have a 1st round pick, they had one of their better drafts because they got Eric McCoy in the 2nd. Then they didn't have a 3rd because they traded up to get Eric McCoy, and they drafted C.J. Gardner-Johnson in the 4th. And then I can't remember. They had I think it was like Saquon Hampton, a couple safeties that weren't very good. But then Caden Ellis in the 7th round. So considering you didn't have a 1st round pick, that was a great draft haul. So hopefully they can do that again.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the history of the number 1 pick, I don't know if it's been more good than bad kind of thing for the Saints.
I think the Saints have missed on more 1st round picks than 2nd round picks in the last 10 years.
But they've had some pretty damn good ones too, though.
1st round picks?
Yeah.
I mean, Marshawn. Ryan,
Cam.
both the same year.
I could argue Ingram.
Olave
Ingram
seems
and
pretty
Cam that
good.
year. Yeah.
Huh?
I would say
That's more
Ingram
than a
and
decade
Cam.
ago. We have gone past the
past
decade
that.
and we're talking about Cam and Mark.
But they were still around.
Sorry.
No, they're
I
still
know,
around.
but that doesn't make them any younger.
So they're still relevant though.
They are, but I said a decade. We're cutting it off.
Okay,
We're
okay,
old.
okay.
Get it? They're old. We're old. I'm the same age as Mark Ingram. Anyway. All right. You got anything else you want to throw out on Sean Payton? Because I'm tired of talking about him.
No, yeah. And you keep talking all this stuff with Senior Bowl. Why? Why is that so important? Like, there's like a Saints breeding ground of talent?
Maybe. We're going to get into that in the next segment. Keep it locked on Inside Black and Gold and hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcast, and maybe even leave us a review between 2 and 5 stars.
Don't do a
all
one.
Right,
it hurts Jeff's feelings.
Stick around. All right, I'll stick around. All right. So before we get going here, I do have to address one comment in particular, and that is from Chris P. Says, "Is that a Mike Thomas Funko Pop in your background?" It is. It actually is. So here you go. It's Mr. MT right here. Yeah, got the goatee and everything. That's him.
It's good to see him. I've missed him.
Never gets hurt on my shelf. Can't guard me. All right.
That looked true at the beginning of the year again, sadly.
Sure did. All right. Yes, thanks, Chris, for noticing. I also have multiple press passes back there, and this is the King Cake baby bobblehead they gave out, but it's like broken, so I have to lean it. And then this is the King Cake baby Mardi Gras beads that they gave out, which coincidentally, and I have no reason to remember this other than the fact that I was there. That's the same game that do you remember when the leak or the roof leaked and they had to like cancel the game? Yeah. That was that game. The game I got those Mardi Gras beads was the game where the movie King Center roof sprung a leak.
Yeah, that was a bit of embarrassing right there.
What a great Mike like just distillation. I don't know of a crystallization of like that entire era of Pelicans basketball. Just like, yeah, the roof's leaking. They tried to put a tarp up to catch the water. It didn't work. Okay, so let's get going. But yes, Chris, thanks for noticing. And we're back here on Inside Black and Gold, and I'm only back for a few days, and then I'm going to hit the road and drive 2 hours over to Mobile to hang out at South Alabama University, which is beautiful, by the way. I don't know if you've ever been there, for the Senior Bowl. It starts on Tuesday. It ends on Saturday. I'll only be there for a couple days going out to the practices, but there's a reason that it's a place you have to be if you're covering the Saints, and we're going to get into more of that. I'm Jeff Nowak alongside Steve Geller. This is Inside Black and Gold. And Steve, if you had to guess, and you probably remember because I told you, over the last 2 decades, how many Senior Bowl players do you think the Saints have drafted?
I do remember you told me it's definitely higher than I even could have imagined, even though I know how much they've dipped into the talent pool over there. But I think you said it was 48.
It's 49.
49. Okay.
They have drafted 49, and I believe it's like 30% of all of their draft picks have come from players that have been at the Senior Bowl. And it's not a crazy number, but the number that's impressive is 8 first-round picks, which,
right.
The whole point of the Senior Bowl is to give guys exposure. A lot of them from smaller schools. They're all seniors, obviously, so they're not guys who are coming out early. And so, you'll see teams take a lot of players at the Senior Bowl, but not necessarily their top picks. But that's not true for the Saints. The Saints will often use first round, second round, third round picks, right? And so I'll just share my screen here and we can go through a lot of these picks because I went through the last 22 drafts.
Wow.
23 drafts, actually, back to 2000, which that's the first year Mickey Loomis was with the team. So it makes sense to kind of cut it off there. And so these are all of the Senior Bowl. Well, let's see if I can find it. These are all the picks for the Saints that were at the Senior Bowl. Let's see. I want to make this fit better. There we go. These are all the picks for the Saints at the Senior. These are all the picks for the Saints of players that were at the Senior Bowl in their respective years. So they have picked at least one player from the Senior Bowl every year, but 2012 and 2007. I forgot for a second, but I found it. I lost my train of thought. Hold on.
They hadn't picked a player in those 2 years.
Yeah. So, if you're at the Senior Bowl, you can almost guarantee that you are watching the Saints draft pick. And that's what makes it worthwhile to go out to. Obviously, we always talk to Saints, front office personnel while we're there as well. But, you go through this list, and one of the questions you asked me prior to coming on is what is their hit percentage of these Senior Bowl players? And I'll be the first to tell you it's not great. But at the same time, you're talking about a draft pick hit percentage, which 50% is probably a decent number outside of the first round. My issue with the Saints picks at the Senior Bowl is that a lot of their first round picks have not been good. So look, it's okay, Trevor Penning, jury's still out, right? But then 2021 Peyton Turner, eesh. You know what? I think I'm not completely out on Peyton Turner yet, but I'm getting close. I think what he does in 2023 will obviously be a big year for him one way or the other, right? You go down.
It's hard to say
Adam Troutman.
We just don't see him enough.
Yeah, right. But I mean, that's why, I think they're probably going to let Marcus Davenport walk, who, guess what? Another Senior Bowl guy. And I think it's more about okay, can we open a path for him to get regular snaps? And then how does he perform? Because, I think he looked solid when he was on the field this year. He had that unfortunate ankle injury right after a 4th down stop. So he had the block field goal at the end of the Falcons game. So, I don't know. I'm not out on Peyton Turner yet, but you're getting close, right? And so it's just a matter of what can he do this year to kind of rebuild that stock. You keep going down. Alex Anzalone, Sheldon Rankins, solid first-round pick. Stephon Anthony, not a solid first-round pick, right? So you kind of work your way down this list. Stanley Jean-Baptiste, yeah. But then, look, Teron Armstead, right?
Kakaha was great until he couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah, he had Crohn's or something. I can't remember. I don't know if that was him actually. But yeah, Kakaha was hurt. Garrett Grayson,
another ACL with him.
Yeah. Keep going. Oh, look, Cam Jordan. Cool. Johnny Patrick. Yeah. Patrick Robinson, Jimmy Graham. Woo. These 2 players I can't name. Meh. Thomas Morstead. Cedric Ellis. Tracy Porter.
Oh, man.
Carl Nix. This was actually probably their best. Well, actually, no, I take that back. Because Cedric Ellis was terrible, but Tracy Porter was good. So, it's...
Carl Nix was good, too.
Carl Nix was good. Roman Harper. Then Alfred Fincher. 2004, you had Devery Henderson. 2003, you had John Stinchcomb. 2002, LaCharles Bentley. These are guys I don't even remember as NFL players. 2001, Cedric Hodge. 2000, Darren Howard in the second round. So, you look at it and you can see that this is a team that not only goes to the Senior Bowl to find players, they go to the Senior Bowl to find early round draft picks. Like you're talking rounds 1, 2, and 3. Like you don't see that many 5th, 6th, 7th round picks out of the Senior Bowl. You're seeing early to mid rounds. The other interesting thing, go ahead.
For some reason, you see that really stress the fact that they want that veteran type of college player, I guess you would say, coming in instead of, they stress a lot of that value of having that more experience in the in the game instead of the lesser draft picks that the younger guys coming in, I guess you would say.
Yeah, I think the Saints value maturity and leadership.
Maybe that's the word I was talking for. Yeah, I was searching for maturity there for sure.
Yeah, when you see the Saints draft players, a lot of times it'll be okay. This was a captain on their team. This was a team leader. This is a 4-year starter. That sort of thing. And I think from an upside perspective, it's not the greatest strategy, right? Like you don't get necessarily these like crazy high ceiling players, but you do get a lot of high floor players. And I think that's part of the reason you've seen a lot of consistency from this team over the last decade or so, right? Like even their down seasons have been 7-win seasons. Like that's the low watermark since 2010, right? Or since 2005 is 7 wins. So, I think that's how you get there, and that's how you kind of build from that. Now you want to get the hits, and I think the interesting thing is you look at all these players, all 49 of these players, not a single one of them is an Ohio State player. But we know that this team loves drafting Ohio State players. So, and there are Ohio State players that went to the Senior Bowl. So it is kind of interesting how they break it down. Like I'm going to go to the Senior Bowl, I'm not even going to watch the Ohio State players because I know the Ohio State players the Saints are going to look at are going to be at the pro day for Ohio State.
Right. Those are the young kids they're after. They know that if you've lasted to senior year at Ohio State, we have nothing to do with you.
Right. Like Chris Olave, Mike Thomas, Pete Werner. There's a couple others that I can't think of. Malcolm Jenkins. These weren't Senior Bowl guys. But they're on the roster. They're like it's like they either draft a Senior Bowl guy or an Ohio State player. Or Tennessee. Although Alontae Taylor was at the Senior Bowl last year. The other guy was DeMarco Jackson, who was there. That was App State. But I actually, after this last draft, and I don't know if I ever actually used this anywhere, but I asked Mickey Loomis about why this team ends up with so many Senior Bowl players, and this is what he said.
Yeah, I don't think that's conscious by us. Obviously, we get, that's an extra look, an extra evaluation. We send pretty much our whole staff to the Senior Bowl, so we have a lot of eyes on players there. We're pretty thorough, with interviews, and Jim Nagy and their staff there is really accommodating, not just to us, but to all the teams. And so we just get more information and the more you're around, players, I think the more you end up liking them. So, but it's not a conscious thing by us. It's not a box that we're checking when we're going through this process. That the guy was at the Senior Bowl.
See, I don't necessarily believe that. Just because of like what you see when 3 players from the Senior Bowl pop up. Like, even if it's not a conscious box you're checking, it's definitely something that you are valuing because you use that so in depth as a scouting resource. And this year in particular, you're going to have Ronald Curry as the offensive coordinator for the national team. Then you're going to have Declan Doyle and Demarcus Robinson. Is that his name? I believe, as the cornerbacks coach and tight ends coach. So, when you're looking at what players are they going to be really looking at this year or trying to look, considering in the draft, tight end is a position that would make a lot of sense. So you're kind of breaking down the prospects of like, okay, who are you going to watch closely? And this is what I'm doing. This is what I did this morning is like, okay, who are the tight ends out there? So you have like Dalton Kincaid out of Utah, Luke Musgrave, Oregon State. Those would both be 2nd round guys. Cameron Latu out of Alabama, Josh Weil out of Cincinnati, who, Travis Kelce makes me take every Cincinnati tight end seriously, even if it's not fair. And those would be like round 5 guys. And so, you have coaches working directly with these players in an instance where not every coach is going to have the access that they're having. So I think when the Saints are kind of weighing that, you're going to look at safeties, because I think that's what Demarcus Robinson is looking at, and tight ends, and then just kind of the overall offensive structure of both of these teams. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's where you end up seeing some of these draft picks get made.
Any defensive tackle prospects to maybe look at?
That's, no, there really aren't that many. And, like a guy like Siaki Ika from Baylor is interesting. He's a second round guy. Will McDonald, Iowa State, he's a second round guy. But there's no real top end defensive line prospects at the Senior Bowl this year. I mean, there's some edge rusher prospects, but I don't see this team adding an edge rusher because, like I said, I think you do need to figure out what you have in Peyton Turner, and I don't think you want to muddy that for him any more than it already has been. And so I don't think this is the year where you have one pick in the second round and you go in for another edge rusher. Maybe somebody falls that you really like. Maybe you're trying to replace Cam Jordan down the road and you need to have somebody in there. But I think that this is a year where you're either going interior offensive line. I could see them picking a guard kind of so that they can move on from Andres Pete eventually. And I do think that the Saints, when they do have a pick in this range in the second round, they know that, the value of an interior offensive lineman is a lot higher because they're not going in the first round, whereas you're seeing all the offensive tackles come off the board. And so you might be able to squeeze out one of the top, guard prospects in that range. That's what they did with Eric McCoy. They traded up to get Eric McCoy in the second round, and that worked out really well for them. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the direction they go. But I know people are going to want a quarterback at 40. I do not think that there is any way the Saints are taking a quarterback at 40. I just don't.
I mean, I know a lot of speculation's been about Hendon Hooker, but is he going to be around by then?
Yeah, and he's invited to the Senior Bowl. I don't know how much he's going to do. Like, he's still dealing with a knee injury.
Yeah, I don't.
So I don't know what kind of look you're going to get. So I think he's going to be around in the third. If you want him, I think you can get him in the third round. The other guy that I think is interesting is Jaron Hall, BYU. Saints really like BYU players. They don't necessarily like BYU quarterbacks, but they do have Taysom Hill. So who knows? Maybe that is kind of a connection they can mine. The other guy, Max Duggan, TCU, I find interesting. They can connect the past and future TCU quarterbacks with Andy Dalton being the bridge to Max Duggan. Maybe that's what you can do. But he's an interesting guy to watch. The other guy who I think is a really intriguing wide receiver prospect that the Saints might be able to steal in the late rounds, and I think that's where they like to get guys like this, is Trey Palmer. Do you remember that name?
Yeah.
LSU. So he went out to Nebraska and he caught 72 passes for 1,000 yards, and he is a blur. And the only reason I bring this up is because I think Rashid Shaheed was good enough as a rookie that you have to bring in some return depth behind him because you're going to want to incorporate him in the regular offense way more significantly than you did this year. And you have to have someone, if you don't bring Hardy back, which I don't think they're going to bring Deontay Hardy back, you have to have someone who can step in there. And I don't think Marquez Callaway is going to be that guy. He's also a restricted free agent. You could bring him back. But I think you're going to be looking for another return guy. And he could be a guy that you get in the seventh round, maybe as a UDFA, who I think is really intriguing. I think he was like just grossly underused from a talent perspective at LSU, and his speed is legit.
Yeah, I was surprised, that Taysom wasn't used more in special team in the return game at all.
Yeah, I don't know. He's not. I mean. Were you upset seeing Rashid back there?
No, not at all. But like over someone like a Callaway or, I'd rather have Taysom over him, obviously.
This past season?
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, like, when would you have done that?
No, I'm just saying anytime you're using someone other than Shaheed, I don't know what else in the return game, I would tend to lean more towards trying to get Taysom out there. I'm always looking for Taysom touches, I guess.
I mean, I don't have any issue with Rashid being the returner, but I think having one guy do both kick and punt returns is a big ask if you also are including them in
Right.
the everyday offense. Now,
Sure.
kick returns, I think he could probably handle, but like I don't think you want him to do both. And it's like if you're giving him 70% of the snaps as a wide receiver, it's a lot to ask to also have him go back there and return kicks every day. So, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised.
Do you think his wide receiver usage would get bumped up that much?
I better.
Right, it better, but I mean, I don't know what to anticipate next year. I would hope to see more, even more Shaheed. It just felt like it was still, I guess, maybe a feeling out process too of seeing what exactly he could do. I just felt he was underutilized towards the end of the year, especially the last 2 games.
Sorry. Well, we got a comment that I think is lying.
Oh,
He says Sergeant King. It says Brady going to the Raiders. Breaking news. I think he's lying. I'm pretty sure he's lying.
I haven't seen anything about that. My phone hasn't been buzzing.
Right, my phone would be exploding.
I did just look down to make sure, and no, it's not exploding.
Right, I just looked up Tom Brady on Twitter, and it's not there. So stop lying to us. If you lie again, I'm gonna have to block you.
Yeah, we believe me, we follow enough. There's so much out there. Obviously, you know, with social media now, it makes it so easier for tons of fake news and reports and inside information to be a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, especially now that you can buy a check mark. Makes it a little easier to scam people. And who knows?
But
Maybe
they
that's what
haven't-
happened. Maybe he saw a tweet from Rap Shirt.
I never got my check mark taken away, thankfully.
Yeah, I don't think they're taking them away, but
You can just buy them.
okay, there's one more interesting kind of breakdown from the Senior Bowl and how the Saints use it that I want to get to before we go. And it's basically like picks by position, right? So of the 49 picks, 12 of them have been either defensive ends or defensive tackles. So they do look hard at the lines, right? They've taken 9 offensive linemen. So 21 of the 49 picks have been either offensive or defensive linemen. So when you're like, and that's what it becomes difficult because there's so many players at the Senior Bowl, and I'm kind of talking about from a scouting perspective. So I'm going out there and I'm like, I don't recognize a majority of these players. I'm trying to figure out which helmets belong to which school. There's so many. And so like the first day I'm out there was really just trying to figure out who was who. So that like last year, one of the biggest goals I had was to go find Trevor Penning. Now it was pretty easy because he's a behemoth and he was standing a foot taller than basically everybody else. But like it is difficult the first couple of days to try to figure out, okay, who is that guy? Who is that guy? Who's throwing to who's catching? Because they don't wear the same numbers that they wore in college. But one easy way to make sure you get the right people is to look at this like, okay, the Saints are really focused on the defensive and offensive line. So if you're going to watch anything closely, you watch that. They also have taken 9 cornerbacks or safeties. And so again, it's like, okay, that's the position you want to look at. Linebackers, they've taken 9 of them, although a majority have been in the distant past, right? Like you're talking like Stephon Anthony and like in the early 2000s. And I think they've actually moved away from using the Senior Bowl to scout linebackers. So I'm not looking at linebackers that closely. Wide receiver,
quickly,
they've only taken 4.
Has any of the linebacker prospects worked out at all? I guess Zach Baughn's still up in the air.
So here I'll name you all the linebackers. 2001, round 3, Cedric Hodge. 2002, round 3, James Allen. 2004, round 2, Courtney Watson. 2005, third round, Alfred Fincher. So we missed a few years. Then 2015, Stephon Anthony. 2017, Alex Anzalone. He's actually playing really well with the Lions right now, but I wouldn't say he was a great find. 2020,
definitely maybe
Zach
the best
Vaughn.
one though.
And then 2022, DeMarco Jackson. So if you want to look at it and say, you know, Alex Anzalone might be the best of these 9 linebackers they've drafted, and a majority of these have come in the early 2000s. That's not a position I'm looking at that closely because it's shown to be a position they don't scout that closely at the Senior Bowl. It's also just a position they don't draft that heavily. Wide receiver, they've only had 4 of them, and they have not been recent. The most recent one was Traquan Smith. And then before that, you're talking Devery Henderson. So I'm not looking at wide receiver. You know, I'll watch them. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's sad to me that anytime Traquan usually gets brought up and you want to say something positive, it's like, but he's such a great blocker.
He is a great blocker. But yeah, so like I'll watch the wide receivers. Like I'll watch the wide receivers, but I'll look for guys who pop. I'm not necessarily identifying prospects in advance and going to scout them because I know that the Saints aren't doing that, or at least that's what this would indicate to me. The other is just a quarterback. They've only taken 3 of them. The most recent one was Ian Book. Now, so like that's not an indicator that they won't, because it's a weird position when you have Drew Brees and you know that you're not looking for a replacement. Maybe the last few years, but like that's a position where they could look at guys, but this year without a first round pick, I don't know. I am looking at Jared Hall and I am looking at Max Duggan, but I'm not going to spend too much time worrying about them because I just don't think the Saints are going to go after them. But we'll find out. And tight ends, they've only taken 2. Go ahead.
How many Senior Bowl QBs have gone on to, big time, NFL success kind of thing too? That's a position usually that doesn't stick around.
Well, it's tough because, again, you're not getting all of the prospects at the Senior Bowl. And so you're not getting a lot of the top-end Ohio State guys, for example, because their pro day is going to get just as much exposure as a Senior Bowl, and so they don't have to do it. And they're better served getting ready for the Combine at this point than going to the Senior Bowl, and that's going to be true of a lot of the quarterback prospects too. So if you're a first-round quarterback prospect, you might not be showing up here. Kenny Pickett did last year. Like all the quarterbacks showed up last year because there weren't any top 10 quarterback prospects last year. And so like, yeah, you're not getting CJ Stroud. You're not getting Bryce Young, like you're not getting a Cam Newton, you're not getting a Trevor Lawrence. So it makes it a little skewed away from quarterbacks, I think.
Yeah. I wouldn't call it like a hunting ground for your next, your future star kind of deal. No. And occasionally you'll find somebody, but it's rare. Tight ends, they've only taken 2 of them. One of them was Jimmy Graham. So that was a pretty good find. Most recently, it was Adam Troutman. And I know I said that I'm going through this and saying, well, they haven't taken these guys. They haven't taken these guys. I do think that tight end is a position they look at the Senior Bowl. It just doesn't always equate to drafting a tight end in the early rounds because it's just a position that they don't see a ton of value in. But like Adam Troutman got drafted pretty much solely on his Senior Bowl performance. So I think that is a position that this team does value in. And again, they have Declan Doyle as the tight ends coach at the Senior Bowl. So I would expect tight ends to be a position that they could very much draft out of there. Yeah, I'm sure we've talked about it. Just he was one of the Troutman, talking about him. He's one of the more disappointing outputs, just individual player-wise. I mean, the team obviously wasn't a great year, but individually seeing his development, really, we didn't see that at all this season. He kind of was, it's not even an afterthought. He was just not around really. Yeah,
I mean, he's Josh Hill, right? Like that's what you can say about him is he is very much Josh Hill. And I wouldn't say he's been bad. He just hasn't been used. And so, yeah, I think that he was a guy that they traded up for. So you would have expected, they clearly expected more out of him than being Josh Hill, right? Like you can find blocking tight ends. You don't need to trade up in the 3rd round to get a blocking tight end. And so, yeah, he's definitely not been a victory, if you will, in the scouting process.
No, yeah.
But then past that,
I've been waiting to see that offensive pop from him for sure.
Yeah, just hasn't happened.
No.
And then the only other position, fullback, they've taken 1. So the Saints have never drafted a running back that was at the Senior Bowl, which I find really interesting because there are a lot of really intriguing running back prospects at the Senior Bowl. It's a position that doesn't get drafted in the 1st round, and a lot of these running backs are doing everything they can to improve their draft stock, but for some reason the Saints haven't been able to find one at the Senior Bowl. Now, that said, the Saints don't draft running backs, period. So it's not necessarily an indictment on the Senior Bowl running back class as much as it is like the Saints don't draft running backs.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe too, they figure any of the senior backs have less tread on the tire, I guess you could say.
No, I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're at the Senior Bowl or not. They just don't draft them. So going back a decade, you can go back all the way to 2012.
Yeah.
The Saints have drafted 4 running backs. Obviously, 2011, they drafted Mark Ingram in the first round. Since then, they've drafted 4 running backs. It's a long time. You get 7 picks in every draft. They've taken 4 running backs. And 3 of them have been in the 6th round or later. The only one that they drafted in the 3rd round or higher, in the 5th round or higher, was Alvin Kamara. They took him in the 3rd round. Even he wasn't a high pick. It was a great pick, but he wasn't a high pick. The other ones, Boston's, and the funny thing is they actually drafted a running back 4 years in a row. They took Boston Scott in 2018. He was a 6th round pick. They took Daniel Lasco in 2016. He was a 7th round pick. And they took Marcus Murphy in the 7th round in 2015. And then obviously Alvin Kamara was 3rd in 2017. Over the past decade, those are all the running backs they've drafted, which is crazy.
Yeah, Marcus Murphy kind of stuck around for a little bit. Those are some funny names. I mean, saying those names, obviously brings back memories. Daniel Lasco too. Wow.
Some good special teams players.
Sure. I mean, but that's not what when you're talking about running back, obviously, you think of like that workhorse, that cowbell type of player, or someone at least to supplement, a 1-2 kind of punch. And there really hasn't been that besides Ingram and Kamara together, I guess you could say.
Well, I mean, when you're drafting a running back in the 7th round, you're not expecting him to be a bell cow. You're at best, you're hoping for like getting a useful special teams player in the 7th round of a draft. I would argue is a solid return. Right, that's a successful pick. Now, you would love for them to be Marcus Colston and Zach Strief, right? Like those were 7th round picks that obviously were a whole lot better than special teams contributors, but you're not banking on that. And so but again, like Alvin Kamara in the 3rd round, that is a guy you are hoping to be a starter down the road. Mark Ingram down the 1st round, that is a guy who you're hoping to be a star. And so both of those you got very well, but like, again, you just haven't drafted running backs. And that's part of the reason I think that you are so thin at that position. And you've tried to fill the gap with like Latavius Murray's and David Johnson's and all these other guys that you brought in, but just draft a guy, man. Just draft him and develop him. Like they drafted Boston Scott and then they let him go. Now he's scoring 9 touchdowns a year against the Giants or whatever the hell it was. I don't know.
Yeah, you're just bitter over that fact, right?
I'm still mad about that. But again, so as I go through this process, I'm trying to figure out what.
For whatever reason, the team, I feel like maybe because they've had success with the undrafted running back market, maybe they didn't delve too much into the draft class and the stock of the running backs in the draft. But you're right now, that position really needs some kind of injection behind Kamara for sure.
Yeah. But no, so like I'm more so just the Senior Bowl part of this. And like as I go through the process, and I'm like because I'm currently trying to identify, okay, these are the players I'm going to watch closely. Running backs aren't on that list. Like if again, it's kind of like wide receiver where I'll watch them and I'll see, okay, if this guy pops and like I'm going to let them identify themselves to me more so like I'm going to seek them out. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Cause you got a type you're looking for.
Well, I mean, like I'm not going to go into that and be like, okay, I want to see this guy. I want to see this guy. I want to see this guy. But if I'm watching and I see this one guy constantly making plays and picking up blocks and breaking 50-yard runs, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, who is this guy? And I think that's how the Saints are going to approach it. Like they clearly don't value running backs at this scouting event that highly. But if a guy just makes them stand up and be like, oh, who was that? Then I think that's where you go. And so that's how I'm going to approach it. For that position, at least.
Yeah, and I've always, the fact that that the Saints are invested in finding talent there it's always a big event yearly. And the one time I got to go, Jeff, I'll never forget. Obviously, one of the big interviews I did was with now Saint Tano Passigno, but he wasn't drafted by New Orleans.
Tano, did you do the interview in French?
No French.
He speaks French. He also calls himself a fake vegan because he eats fish.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know if he's aware of this, but there is a word for that. I saw it, like the Saints put out a video where they're like, he's like, I'm like a fake vegan. I'm all vegan, but I eat fish. Like it's called pescatarian.
Right. Well, I guess
Which I just thought it was funny.
Yeah, I mean that for you not to be considered, I guess, all it's hard to, I guess, to consider that when you're looking at the veganism. I don't know.
It's wild that he can have that physique while being vegan. Like he's a fucking giant. But I do think that he's a good example of, like, the Saints probably did look at him closely at the Senior Bowl, and when he became a free agent, they went and got him. And so I think that's true as well. And UDFAs too. Like I didn't even bother going through the UDFAs because there's so many of them, and it would be almost impossible. It would take me all day to try to figure out because most of them don't make the roster anyway. So like it's tough. But yeah, I'm sure that if you went through the UDFA list, you'd also see a lot of Senior Bowl guys. So all that is to say, this is a very long segment breaking down, like, why is it important if you're scouting the Saints draft to go to the Senior Bowl? That's why, because you will see at least one, maybe more players that will end up on the Saints at that event for sure.
Yeah, you're pretty much guaranteed. And like you said, with some of the first round draft picks haven't been, widely successful, but the biggest one I'm guessing on the entire list has got to be Cam Jordan.
Yeah,
there hasn't been a better player they've gotten from there.
Yeah, it's tough. Well, let's see. Cam Jordan. I don't know. Jimmy Graham's up there.
Yeah, Jimmy in his prime, man, was unstoppable.
Roman Harper's in the Team Hall of Fame. Devery Henderson's in the Team Hall of Fame. John Stinchcomb. I don't know. Is he in the Team Hall of Fame? He was really good, though. Charles Bentley apparently was good. I don't remember him. That was like so long ago, but apparently he was good. I don't know. Someone told me, someone told me in the comments he was good. I don't think I ever watched him. But it's tough for me when I didn't live here, cover the Saints, to tell you who their starting center was.
I'm still feeling Cam as my number one prospect from the Senior Bowl.
Yeah. I mean, he wouldn't. Tehran maybe.
Durability.
Peyton Turner is going to be. Yeah, I mean, we can say Cam until Peyton Turner takes that mantle from him.
Please, I wish. We all wish that's true. Him and Marcus Davenport combined won't play as many games in their career as Cam Jordan totals.
It's true. That is very true. Like,
that's crazy, right?
So Cesar Ruiz is my guy this year, who I was like a pump the brakes on. It's like, okay, it's year 3. We want to see a jump from him. I'm not giving up on him yet. I think Peyton Turner is going to be that guy for me next year, because I did like what I saw from him in camp. I really did. And I think that there was just a disconnect when he got to the season. He just didn't get regular playing time. I think he got frustrated. And I think that there will be a clearer path to reps this year. And so hopefully, yeah, he can stay healthy. But it wasn't really health that kept him off the field, other than that one ankle injury. Like week 2, he was a healthy scratch because they wanted to get Tano on the field.
Quite
right. And so
scratches.
Yeah. And so, like, I'm not giving up on him yet. Obviously, being a healthy scratch is not a good indicator that you are performing well in practice. But I also think, like, this was a very veteran-laden pass rushing group. And, yeah, you did want to get Tano on the field. You did want to get Carl Granderson on the field. And Peyton wasn't playing at a level that made you feel like, well, we don't want to get Carl out there. Because Carl was playing great. Carl had a great season.
Yeah, when you start being a healthy scratch, you start getting into Stanley Jean-Baptiste territory for me.
Oh, I agree. But I'm not, like I said, that was me for Cesar Ruiz last year. So I think he's going to be my pump the brakes guy this year, where
Okay.
it's like, okay, let's see what he has in his year 3. And we'll go from there. But all right, let's wrap that segment up. It was long, and then we'll get into a mailbag here to close out the show. If you have any questions and you haven't put them in there yet, throw them in. I'm going to go to a quick break here on Inside Black and Gold, and I will store all of these questions. I'll digest all of your takes, and I'll see what comes out the other end. All right. All right. Steve, you still awake over there?
Yes, sir.
Run through this. And we're back here on Inside Black and Gold, and we're going to dive into the mailbag. We haven't done this in a while. I'm looking forward to it. One of my favorite segments that we do. In the off season, things get weird, things get wonky, but we're muddling through. Give us stars, plural.
Multiple.
I'm Jeff Nowak alongside Steve Geller. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. Follow Steve at Steve Geller WWL. And if you haven't subscribed, why not do it? First comment, first question out of the mailbag is more like a comment. It's from Swack Fan. He says, I don't want Sean Payton anywhere in the NFC. I've never understood this idea that if he's not in the NFC, they're better off. It's the same thing that you see like when the Packers are talking about trading Aaron Rodgers. They're like, oh, we want to trade him out of the NFC. Does that really benefit you? Like, I could understand not trading within your own division, but how often do you actually play like the NFC West, right? Like, you're really worried about playing him like once every 4 years, and maybe they'll occasionally give you another matchup. Like, and then if you're talking about the playoffs, like, wouldn't it be worse to lose to that guy in the Super Bowl than it would be to lose in like the NFC Championship or the divisional round? Or where you could win and then all of a sudden you're the winner in that. Like, I don't see how that actually benefits you.
No, for me personally, I'm not even worried about the conference, but I just don't want. Yeah, I was not on board with Peyton going to the Panthers. Like I said, don't want to see him twice a year, every year.
Yeah,
and
right.
To me, that would be a problem. But yeah, if you're going to start looking at the entire NFC, I guess you could say you look at maybe like a team like the Eagles or the Bears, since you play them, it seems so often. But I don't know. Yeah, that wouldn't really concern me too much either. I'm just trying to get, especially at this point with the market seeming to fizzle right now, just some kind of draft compensation for this year, please. I want the Saints in the first round.
Yeah, I can understand that. Like, yeah, okay, we don't want to send him somewhere where he's going to be in our building once a season, and we're going to have to go visit him once a season. That
Yeah.
makes sense to me. I can understand that. But like, yeah, it's like, oh, we would never want to trade him to like, the Cardinals. Like, would that
No.
really, how often do you play the Cardinals? I don't see, and it's like at the expense of slashing your potential suitors, like the potential bidding market in half. Like that's the cost. And that's why the Packers don't want to trade Aaron Rodgers within the NFC. And I'm like, so if this team showed up and gave you the best offer, you'd be like, no, we're gonna have to play you once every 4 years. That's not worth it. I was like, we might have to play him in the NFC Championship. It's like, then don't trade him at all. Like, if that's it doesn't make sense. Anyway, I've always found that dumb.
Yeah, that definitely something that I don't think would be in consideration either, just because you want that compensation for wherever it's coming from, and you're gonna have to play have to play all these teams eventually, obviously, whatever.
Yeah, like if they're trading enough, if they give you the best offer, then it's like, is that a bad thing? Here's Chris P says, "How a 1-star? I think you guys do a good job. This is why I listen. Thanks, Chris. I think we do a decent job too, and yeah, that's why I get annoyed. And I'm not gonna name drop him because he doesn't have a real name, so I can't. Mr. 1-star Pete Carmichael hater. Anyway, thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. This is Mike Marchese. Peyton is coming back to NOLA. ... Watch! Exclamation point.
How long do we have to watch for?
Yeah. Well, and like I get why this is an attractive idea for people, and and I think I went through the whole like, oh, what if he brings Tom Brady? Would that change the equation? But I think like Nick Underhill says this a lot. It's like, I don't think that's how it works when you quit your job. You're just like,
right.
When no one else wants to hire me, you mind if I come back? Like, go quit your job and see if that's how it works. I have a feeling you won't feel that way.
The biggest thing I do feel though in all of this for Sean is the fact that he's never gonna find that same scenario, that same feeling in the Saints building anywhere else. That whatever was special,
unchecked authority,
whatever you want to say, between him being able to do, his free reign and the fact that he was so trusted with things. Yeah, that's not going to be the case everywhere.
Yeah, you're not going to get unchecked authority everywhere you go. It's just a fact of life. But at the same time, like, it's like, no, that bridge is gone. Like, you're not doing it again. I don't see it, especially not this season. Like, if you think that Sean's coming back this year, you're out of your mind. Like, he's either getting traded. He's either getting a job and getting traded somewhere, or he's going back to Fox. Like, he's not going back to the Saints. Like, they're not going to suddenly fire Dennis Allen.
Unless the Saints get Lamar Jackson, and then maybe Sean comes back too.
Well, maybe he might want to, but again, there's two sides in this equation. And if you think that the Saints front office and like ownership was like very, very super understanding of him walking out the door and leaving them high and dry, like they may have said that, and they may have like put on the right face. Like, no, that pissed some people off, right? Like, that wasn't convenient for anybody.
It pissed off a lot of fans.
Yeah. No, I don't see it.
It's like, oh, now you don't have the franchise quarterback, and now you're out of here, instead of trying to, bring in a new guy and develop one, which he never did, obviously.
Well, so, it's just funny, and we can get to that question in a second. We did talk about all like the quarterback kind of coats on the wall for Sean. One that we didn't mention, which should be mentioned as it pertains to Sean, is Tony Romo.
Just because while he was there in Dallas before coming to New Orleans?
Yeah. Like he was Tony Romo's coach. And he wanted to trade for Sean wanted Tony Romo to be his quarterback on the Saints, but the Cowboys wouldn't trade him. So, like, in fairness to Sean, as I go through his list of Garrett Graysons and Ian Books and Luke McCowns and whatever. It is only fair to include Tony Romo in that list, and someone on YouTube pointed that out. So I think it is fair. Like, we should mention, like, he did mold Tony Romo, and he was a very, very good quarterback for a long time. So I'll give him credit there.
Well deserved. I see on that one, but man, he's got a bunch of misses after that.
Yeah, that's the only one that I'm going to add. I'm not adding anybody else. I'll give him Drew Henson, right? Like, no. The Keeping It Real Who Dat Sports podcast. Has anyone thought about this? Maybe Sean Payton is a very bad interviewer. Maybe he is turning teams off in the process. It's a fair question.
I don't buy it.
Sean hasn't had to interview for a job in a long time. Maybe he doesn't do it well. Like, that's a reasonable question. I don't think that's out of the equation here, because not getting a second interview places would indicate that they are not falling in love with you as a coaching candidate. And I mean, I'm not saying like he's like going in there and like, tearing all the posters off the walls and, putting his feet up on the desk. But I'm like, he had basically the run of the show in New Orleans. And that might not, like, the way he wants to go about his job might not match what these teams are looking for in a head coach. And whether they're right or not, right? Like, these teams aren't exactly this paragon of success either. They all fired their coach, so they don't necessarily know what they're talking about in that respect. But, I do think that it's a fair question to ask.
To me, I can't imagine Sean being a bad interviewer just because his smarts, his know-how of the game, and just his overall attitude is going to come through. And he's one of those dudes that people want to be around and has that, quote unquote, I guess you would say, charm about him that I think he's able to win over pretty much the room all the time.
Then where's the job offers? That's all I have to say.
I think it's the big compensation, because you have to give up so much of an allotment of draft picks and making him possibly the highest paid head coach in the NFL. It's like a double whammy back to back. The Denver situation really, when you think about it more and more, after what they had to give up to get Russell, and now you're going to have to give up another boatload to get Sean. It seems like you're crippling the organization too much than helping it.
Possible. Murtis has a more conspiratorial take, which is Murtis Lockett here says maybe Payton is tanking his interviews on purpose. Kind of like when they interviewed coaches last year and they promoted Dennis Allen.
How?
I don't know about that. I don't think he's tanking interviews. If he's tanking interviews, like I said, I don't know. Maybe he is tanking interviews, but I don't think he's intentionally tanking interviews if he's tanking interviews.
Oh, you mean like the Colts lost the Super Bowl because of the Katrina and the Saints?
I don't know what you're referencing. I mean, they did lose the Super Bowl.
No, it was one of those things, and they lost it because, to give the Saints the victory. Right.
It's possible. Here's Keeping It Real again. Says Shaheed was not very impressive at either punt return or kickoff return. Hardy is better. I know special teams units stunk. I mean, Hardy has been like, Deontay hasn't had a good kick return season since 2020.
That was his Pro Bowl year, right?
No, that was 2019.
No? Okay.
2020 was the COVID year, and he was solid, but he was hurt a lot of the season. He had a good return season, but he missed a lot of games. 2021, he was bad. 2022, he was bad. Now, what Deontay always did very well that went underappreciated was he was really good at getting upfield and just going headfirst into traffic and fielding kicks where if you didn't get to them, they're going to bounce and roll 10, 15, 20 yards. He's going to fair catch them and they're not going to go anywhere, but just fielding them at all is saving you yardage. And I think that's something that Rashid didn't do particularly well this year, but as a rookie, you don't want to be muffing punts, and he didn't muff any punts. So in that respect, I'm okay with it. Like, in the return game, so much of being successful is not making mistakes. And he didn't make any major mistakes. He made one in his first game as the returner. I can't remember which game this was, but he let the ball bounce and it went like 30 yards. It might have been the Bengals. And like that was the only real bad mistake he made, I think, in the return game. But he was solid.
Like he had two games it was where he got tripped up by the turf.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't break any plays. Like he didn't make any game-breaking plays in the return game, but he also didn't make any mistakes. And so that's where I'm okay with it. Like I'm okay with special teams being neutral, right? You can't lose you games. Would it have been better if you had some more, big plays in that regard? Yes, but I don't think he was bad. Again, I like his profile in the offense a lot better than I like him as a dedicated returner. So I'm okay with them, kind of farming that out a little bit and maybe bringing in someone like a Trey Palmer who is more of a burner and is just there to just do that. But I don't think you're gonna pay Deontay. I think like that situation got awkward, and I don't think you're gonna bring him back.
And I'll just say for Shaheed, I don't have a problem with him on special teams in the punter kickoff return either. In fact, I look forward to seeing more of that in year 2 to see how much he can grow, obviously, and just one of those guys you feel can break one at any second.
Yeah. There's one more here. Jeff Ireland and the Saints seem to love Will Levis of Kentucky. They like the offense he ran. I agree. I think they would love Will Levis, but I don't think they're going to have a pick to go get him. He's going to be, I think if he got to the middle of the first round, that would be a disappointment for him because I think he's a top 10 candidate if he shows off. Well, I mean, for him, it's going to come down to how he performs in, for example, the Senior Bowl. He is the top quarterback prospect at the Senior Bowl. So that's going to be his first kind of showcase situation, right? If he goes out there and he stinks, then maybe the Saints will have a shot at him because maybe he does drop into the second round. But I think it's more likely that he goes out there and he shows off the talent that, Kentucky's tough because it's not a quarterback paradise. So, it's kind of like Daniel Jones at Duke, where it's like you kind of have to look past the fact that the offense stunk around him and just kind of look at the skills. But yeah. But I don't disagree with this. I do think the Saints like Will Levis.
Sure. I just definitely don't think it's going to be a scenario, obviously, where he's even close to being around when they would have a pick or even could get into a pick. Even with number 12, you could get from Houston, say, for Sean Payton, Levis ain't going to be around.
I think he could be. And if you are at 12, then you would have the ammunition,
the range
to potentially go up a few picks, right? Like you could be the Chiefs going to get Pat Mahomes. I'm not comparing Will Levis to Pat Mahomes, just comparing the situation where the Saints were at 11 and the Chiefs traded it up to 10 and took Pat Mahomes. So like that's the situation you could be in, but I don't think that's going to happen either. And we can go back to this over and over again for the same reason. I mean, the only way you're getting the 12 from the Texans is if there's someone else there that's like forcing you to give up the 12, right? Like if the Texans are the only game and it's like he's either going there or not, there is no incentive for them to give up a first round pick. And there's no incentive for Sean to be like, yeah, guys, definitely trade the number 12. I don't want that if I'm going to be your future coach. So, like, I don't think that that's even a question at this point.
Well,
even if Houston did show it.
Right. I was going to say, I just figure, obviously, when they have, what is it, number 2? Obviously, yes. number 12 would have to come into play for.
Do they have number 2?
Yeah, because Chicago has 1, and then Arizona. I know it's either
2 or 3. They do. They have number 2. Yeah, they would have had number 1 if they didn't accidentally win in Week 18.
What I'm saying, though, you would imagine though that 12 pick would have to come into play for Payton. What are the Saints are just going to take a second round pick for him?
They could take a future first.
Well, that's what they were going to have to do with Arizona if that deal comes about.
Right. But there's a big difference to me between giving up a future first and giving up the 12 this year. especially because you're adding Sean, thinking he's going to kind of raise the watermark to somewhere where you might not, ideally you're not getting the 12th pick, but worst case scenario, you're able to get 2 premium picks this year, and then next year kind of ends where it does. But yeah, either way, I don't think that it's going to happen. I don't think that the market's there for him. All right. Chris D, do you think Sean will go back to Fox? I think that's going to be the only option for him personally.
I'm hoping that's not the case, obviously, because I am selfish and want draft picks so we have something to talk about when we're doing all of our draft coverage instead of a day of absolutely waiting around and doing nothing.
Well, hey, if the Saints aren't in the first round of the problem with the Saints not having a first round pick is you still can't not, like, you still have to
work.
Yeah, because that they could very easily trade into the first round. Like, they're not a team that's going to sit on their hands. So it's like you can't like relax. You still have to be like waiting. That's what makes it frustrating.
Right. Something out of this world could happen where the Saints have just sent Alvin Kamara to the Titans, or I'm just saying, for a first round draft pick, something could manufacture a pick other than obviously Sean Payton. It's not likely though, but it still could happen.
Well, just for example, like the Saints do really love Will Levis, and he completely stinks at all of his workouts and all of his whatever, but they're just in love with the film, and they've interviewed him and they really like him, and they as Thomas Dimitroff once said to me, they smelled the pits and they came away happy. And then he falls into like the mid first round. Are you able to get up to like 23, 24? Are you able to flip the 40 and some other assets and go get him if he's really the guy who you think he is? Maybe, right? And so that's why, like, you can't just be like, well, they don't have a first round pick, I guess we can take the night off. Yeah. Anyway, I'm looking forward to it. Chris D, Carl was playing better than Marcus Davenport. That's Carl Granderson. I wouldn't be surprised if Marcus is traded. Marcus Davenport is a free agent, so you're not trading him. But I agree that Carl was playing better than Marcus. Marcus was benched late in the season. Like, he was playing, but he wasn't starting. Carl was starting. And so I think you are happy with what you got out of Carl. You are very disappointed in what you got out of Marcus. And the only question with Marcus is, are you able to bring him back at a rate that is like a sweetheart deal for you and is kind of a rebuild short-term contract for him, where it's a kind of a win-win situation, and you're going to be able to get Marcus, contract year Marcus, that you thought you were going to get this year, next year at a steep discount, then I see you bringing him back. But if you're talking about paying Marcus at like a competitive salary for like a middle to top end defensive end, sorry, he's walking. I'm not paying that.
I'm going to guarantee that Saints fans are going to get mad though when Marcus Davenport ends up leaving to go join Ryan Nielsen somewhere, kind of thing. Yeah,
and then gets 15 sacks and plays 16 games.
Right, amazing.
Well, but that's the thing. That's the thing with Marcus, and we've seen it, right? Like, I think Marcus's issue this year was confidence, and because it's not like he suddenly forgot how to be that game-wrecking defensive end that we saw last year when he was healthy. I don't know. It just wasn't clicking for him, and so like that is the frustrating thing, that you probably do end up letting him walk, and maybe he does show up somewhere where he kind of can get his confidence back, and suddenly he's this double-digit sack guy again. It would not surprise me at all. And so, yeah, but I just don't see, this guy had a half a sack all freaking season. That is absurd. Peyton Turner had 2.
It's almost as if the finger injury had some kind of a mental effect also on his game. I don't know.
Do you think it's like a Samson situation where all of his football talent was in his pinky and he cut it off and it's like, oh no.
It's gone. Some of the aggressiveness or something. It just, he wasn't that same beast mode kind of upfront guy this year.
Yes. I think we've actually gotten to the bottom of this. His football talent was in his pinky, and then he cut it off, and it was all gone.
I don't know that, but
Anyway.
maybe also too became kind of like a self-conscious thing. He was like bothered by the fact that he was missing that thing. Remember, he got really, when we did talk to him during training camp, he was kind
Well,
of
he
put
was
off
weirded
about
out that everyone took pictures of it.
Exactly right. He's like, he was kind of weirded out about the whole scenario of like, well, you guys took pictures of it and blew it up and put it all over social media. So it definitely was something that bothered him right there.
Yeah. No, I'm sure.
Like whatchamacallit, Kyle Turley went to anger management. I feel like Marcus Davenport needs the reverse of that almost. He needs
He needs
anger
to
and
go to
still
anger
management.
class.
Yes. I want you to
Yeah, he
release
does.
that.
Yeah, he's not a mean guy on the field, although he did punch Deontay Foreman in the helmet. So, but even that was kind of like, if you're gonna punch a guy, punch a guy. Don't give him this kind of like slap. If you're gonna get an ejection, earn it. Go to the what was his name from the Bears? I'm blanking on it.
Oh, the receiver
Guy who punched CJ. Javon Wims. Go to the
That's
Javon
it.
Wims school of sucker punching. Anyway, Chris D wants the Saints to draft Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama. He's AL 2.0. I don't know what that means. I think he might have hit the L instead of the K. They are right next to each other. And he's saying AK 2.0. But yeah, I mean, like, I would love the Saints to start drafting running backs. I hope they do, but it's just not their game. Let's see.
Well, you think this year though they're going to have to? I don't think they're going to go out
on that. It's like, what do the Saints do at running back, right? And I hope so. I mean, but they don't really have a ton of picks.
I know it's it's hard to guarantee you're going to find that guy, but you definitely, we've talked about this a bunch. You need to find someone along with obviously Alvin Kamara to be more of that pounded up the middle kind of guy in this offense for me. I've seen way too many times where you're letting Kamara do that, that's where he shouldn't be used, and we should be getting more screen passes his way instead.
Yeah, so a free agent to be that is intriguing to me, although he does come with baggage, is Kareem Hunt.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want two running backs that punch people right outside of elevators.
Teo.
But like from a skill set perspective and from a tread on the tires perspective, and I don't know what his market's going to be. I think he's an intriguing guy. But yeah, like you should be able to just like you look at the running backs that are drafted and you're like, why can't we get one of those? Why can't we get a Kenny Walker? Why can't we get a Breece Hall? These guys aren't going in the first 2 rounds. These are 3rd and 4th round picks. Actually, I think they were both 3rd round picks. Like they're there to be had. You just got to draft them. And I'm not saying they need to start drafting running backs in the 1st and 2nd round, but there's talented players to be found, and you just got to use picks on them. Like that's
for
it.
whatever reason, definitely that position was not stressed at all.
It's like I would much rather you draft a dart throw running back in the 7th round than Tommy Stevens, for example.
It was an interesting project.
Like, oh yeah, we want to draft a running back, but we're going to draft a quarterback that we think can play tight end.
I don't even know if Tommy Stevens
that doesn't want to be here. That would rather be in Carolina.
And now I don't think he's in the NFL.
No, I don't think so either. But he did get to Carolina. They got him. They got their guy.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's going to wrap it up for us here on Inside Black and Gold. Thanks for everyone who stuck around. This was fun. I enjoy doing these mailbags. Hit us up on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak and at Steve Geller WWL. Leave a rating, leave a review. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And I'm going to stop complaining about stars. That was a one-time only thing. But if you will leave us a rating and a review, I do appreciate it. Again, if we don't talk about what you think we should talk about, keep in mind that we will eventually. And all you got to do is ask. All right, Steve, any parting words?
Yeah, real quick, who you got making the Super Bowl? I'm gonna go Eagles versus Chiefs, even though there's a banged up Patrick Mahomes.
That's right. You did promise people we would make these picks. You're going Chiefs. I'm sticking with Joe Burrow, man.
I
He
understand,
doesn't lose
right?
big games. And I know Pat Mahomes is walking around like trying to pretend his ankle isn't like blowing up. He's so full of it. Like you see him like walking like it's like wow, he doesn't have a limp, but then it's like he gets around the corner and he's like ah no,
Oh, it's just
oh man,
wild.
I'm betting the Bengals. I'm picking the Bengals, and then uh, it's hard to pick against Brock Purdy at this point because every time I do, I'm wrong. Like I keep saying, oh, I'm going to bet against Brock Purdy because he's a rookie and he's eventually going to look like a rookie. He has. If it was going to happen, you think it would happen by now. But I do think that the Eagles are just too complete of a football team. Like there are the two most complete football teams in the NFL are the 49ers and the Eagles. And I do think that if the Eagles avoid turnovers and they don't make life easier on the 49ers and they do force Brock Purdy to have to beat them, I think they win that game. I think that was the big difference between what that Cowboys game could have been and what it was is the 49ers never had any scoreboard pressure. They were able to play from in front and let Brock Purdy do the things he was comfortable doing. Whereas if the Eagles are able to score and make Brock Purdy do things he's not necessarily comfortable doing, they win that game. So I'm picking the Eagles.
Yeah, with me for Philly's got to get to Purdy and stop making him look so darn comfortable. I think I might have texted you something. It's like he looks ridiculously at ease, and we're like in the depths of the playoffs here, and he's kind of playing off Joe Cool NFC style.
It's aggravating how easy he's making it all look.
Absolutely. Right.
Like all of these teams are just like, oh, we can't find a quarterback. We'll never win if we can't find a quarterback. And then literally the last pick in the 7th round is like, oh yeah, this is nothing.
No,
it's like I'm at Southern Miss with Nick Mullins. Huh?
I've been one of those too. I keep waiting for him to come down to earth kind of deal, and it hasn't happened. He keeps putting up the numbers.
Yeah, I've lost money on him. I've bet against him like multiple times and lost every time. So
Brock busted.
Here we go again. Maybe see, and this is me overreacting. This is why I lose all my bets because I watched the Eagles torch the Giants, and now I'm like, well, the Eagles must be the best team ever because I like the Giants and they're not that bad. But then now I'm overreacting, thinking the Eagles are the best thing on the planet, and then the 49ers are just going to win 10. And
I'll say this for the Eagles: they did it convincingly after they had struggled for a little bit. After they had a hot start to the season, and then kind of looked like they were waning, but Jalen Hurts and the offense kind of had their way, and it's obviously going to be a tough road against that Niners defense, but I don't know. I got a feeling we're in for a high-scoring game there too.
They shouldn't wane in that one.
I don't think it's going to be that defensive struggle.
More like low Wayne.
I need a Funko Pop.
Yes, I have a Frodo Baggins. If you want to take a run at that, it doesn't fit on my shelf or makes sense.
Do they make them for like every movie character?
I think you could find a Funko Pop for literally anything on the planet. They're like they're like people treat them like
Beanie
Babies in terms of like how they're gonna like gain value. And I'm like, guys, that's never gonna be worth anything. It's just a toy.
What if your Funko was signed by Mike Thomas though?
It probably would. Well, I've always said this. I think it's so wild to me that like it would be so crazy to me if I had the ability to make things more valuable by putting my name on them. And I do think if Mike Thomas came and signed it, it would be worth more than it is now. I don't know what that would be. It wouldn't be that much more.
You never know in the crazy Funko Pop world of collecting.
In this Funko world we live in. All right, y'all. That's going to wrap it up. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Who Dat? This is Inside Black and Gold. Check us out. We're going to be posting. I think Tuesday, Friday is going to be the schedule from here on out. It just makes more sense. Trying to record a Thursday episode in the off season is just not enough time and not enough news. So that's what we're going to keep doing. I do like the idea of making this one the live episode, so maybe that's what we'll keep doing. But thanks everyone who chimed in, and again, if you have any questions, comments, hit me up. Twitter. Don't hit me up on Instagram because I never use it. But yeah, that's it. All right, Steve, say goodbye.
Sean to Arizona, make it happen.